Hello Summoners, and welcome back to another ProGuides patch rundown. My name is Dan, and today I'll be going over all the changes that were made in patch 9.24b. I'll cover all the details, including a tier list for each role that was made by our in-house analysts and partnered pro players. Patch 9.24b is the last official patch of the preseason, and it raised a lot of questions. Is Aphelios being gutted? Are elemental dragons being removed? Will the Garen buffs make him broken again? Don't worry, we got you covered, and we'll answer all of these questions in this video. Also, since this patch is a part B of the initial 9.24 patch, we'll also be throwing in our mid-patch analysis tier lists, which are backed by fresh statistics. This will ensure that we provide the best and most accurate tier lists available. Also, guys, today's question of the day is, what are you looking forward to in Season 10? Me personally, I'm excited to see Set being released and also being put in that new League of Legends fighter game coming up. Let us know your answers down in the comments below, and guys, since Season 10 is just about to start in a couple weeks, make sure to check out ProGuides.com to improve at League of Legends. Using our website, you can have a strong start to Season 10 and reach your dream rank within weeks. ProGuides.com is the best proven way to get better at League, and we have thousands of guide videos similar to this one. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description, pick up a Challenger level coach, and use the preseason downtime to start learning more about League of Legends. Now, with that being said, let's jump right into the patch rundown and mid-patch update. Starting with the dragon changes. Although the elemental drakes were nerfed a few weeks ago, it appears that they're still way too strong and are in need of another nerf. First up, we have the Infernal Drake. Infernal is one of the strongest dragons in the game right now, and it'll be receiving a decent nerf this patch. Instead of 5 to 20% bonus AD and AP, it'll now grant 4 to 16% instead. Next up, the Infernal Soul will also receive a nerf to now do much less damage. Up next is the Mountain Dragon. Mountain Drake is probably the best dragon in the game right now and was long overdue for a nerf. For patch 9.24b, the Mountain buff will be reduced from 8 to 32% bonus armor and magic resist to 6 to 24%. The Mountain Dragon Soul will also be nerfed, and it'll now give you a much smaller shield. It felt like the teams with the Mountain Dragon Soul would become borderline unkillable, so this was a much needed change. Then we have the Ocean Dragon. Although Ocean Dragon did see a ton of nerfs within the recent patches, it's still a bit too strong and is receiving another nerf this patch. Instead of 3 to 12% missing HP regen, it'll now grant 2.5 to 10% instead. The Ocean Soul will also be reduced to give you much less sustain over 4 seconds instead of 3 seconds now, which is another big nerf. The team with the Ocean Soul was literally unkillable, so I'm loving this change. Lastly, for the dragons, we have the Ultimate Elder Dragon. The Elder Dragon buff was recently buffed by a huge amount thanks to the addition of the Execute threshold. However, it appears that this buff was way too powerful, and it was almost a guaranteed win since the team with Elder usually also had the Dragon Soul. For patch 9.24b, the Elder Dragon buff will have its duration decreased from 180 seconds to 150 seconds, and the burn damage has been nerfed from 90 to 270 to 75 to 225. That's it for the dragon changes. On to the item changes. Lethality users have been struggling a bit after the loss of the Headhunter passive on Serrated Dirk. For patch 9.24b, the balance team will be making some decent buffs to lethality items to make sure that assassin itemization still feels good and rewarding. Firstly, Serrated Dirk will have its AD increased from 25 to 30. This is a nice little change which compensates for the removal of the former passive. It also means that you won't have to build triple longsword anymore because Serrated Dirk will be of better value starting next patch. Next up, we have Edge of Night, which was recently reworked to function more like Banshee's Veil. Although this change was better for clarity of Edge of Night, it ended up almost gutting it, and only a handful of users are still building it today. For next patch, Edge of Night will have its AD buffed by 5 as well. This again is a nice little change, and it'll justify building this item over other lethality ones like Duskblade or Yomu's. Alright, now on to the champion balance changes, starting with the top lane, Garen. Ever since his rework, Garen has been receiving a ton of nerfs within the past few patches. Although some would argue that these nerfs were well deserved, it appears that the balance team have over-nerfed him last patch and are looking to give him a little bit of love. In patch 9.24b, Garen will have his E Judgment spin damage per level nerf reverted to now grant 4 to 20 base with 0 to 8.2 damage based on level. This is a nice little buff for Garen, which will increase his overall damage output by a decent amount. Garen will be added back into our top lane S+ tier for patch 9.24b. Gnar. Gnar has been struggling in the top lane meta for the past few years and was in dire need of some buffs. For patch 9.24b, Gnar will receive a few changes which are aimed at increasing his damage and dueling potential in the Mega Gnar form. Firstly, his Q, Boulder Toss, will have its damage ratio increased from 1.2 to 1.4 total AD. Next up, his W, Wallop, will have its base damage increase during the mid to late game from 25 to 105 to 25 to 145. This is a really nice buff for Gnar, which will work very well with his shortened ultimate cooldown. Although his early game is still going to be rough, our analysts believe that Gnar can make a comeback this patch, and we'll be placing him in the A tier for top lane. However, we'll be keeping a close eye on him and see if he drops into the B tier in our next update. The top lane tier list sees a couple of changes in the patch 9.24b update. One new member that has been added into the S tier this patch is Malphite. Malphite's play rate and ban rate have dropped recently due to the many nerfs he received within the past few patches. However, what players did not realize is that those nerfs were only aimed at the full AP Malphite jungle and mid build instead of the top lane tank build. Full tank top lane Malphite is extremely oppressive right now and is somewhat of a sleeper OP pick. He can easily demolish most of the other top laners in the game right now, and he also does a surprising amount of damage with either Conqueror or Grasp. In the B tier, we've added one new champion, which is the reworked Diana. Trust me when I say this, guys, but the reworked Diana is busted, but only in the mid lane. When you start playing Diana in the top lane, you better be prepared to run into losing matchup after losing matchup. Most of the S+, S, and A tier champs in the top lane can roll over Diana with ease right now. However, this doesn't mean that you can't play her top. There are some high elo Korean Diana mains who are purely playing her in the top lane despite having a ton of losing matchups. You just have to be really good at her and know how to break even in those tougher lanes. In the B tier, we've demoted one champion this patch, which is Heimerdinger. Heimer top is still going to be annoying as hell to versus in patch 9.24b, but it'll be nowhere as strong. This is mainly due to two big changes which have happened this patch and last patch. Firstly, Conqueror has been nerfed on ranged users to lower the oppressive of those top lane ranged bullies. In addition to that, Heimerdinger will be receiving a decent nerf this patch, which will also lower his damage output. We'll cover those in the mid lane section, so stay tuned. Alright, now onto the jungle. Graves! First up in the jungle changes, we have Graves. Although he has received a few big buffs within the past year, it appears that he's still a bit weaker than what the balance team had intended. For patch 9.24b, Graves will receive a huge buff which will increase his mobility and armor. His E, Quick Draw, will have its cooldown lowered from 18 to 14 seconds to 16 to 12 seconds. At first glance, 2 seconds might not seem like much, but it's actually a huge buff. Not only will this allow him to get tankier over time with the armor passive, but it'll also increase his mobility and damage output thanks to those smooth auto cancels. Graves will be placed in the A tier for patch 9.24b, but we'll see if that changes later. Shaco. Next up in the jungle, we have Shaco. Ever since his rework, Shaco has been overperforming in the jungle, especially in the lower elos. For patch 9.24b, the balance team are looking to nerf Shaco to lower his win rate, ban rate, and play rate all across the board. His E, 2-shift Poison, will have its damage lowered from 70 to 170 with 80% AD scaling and 60% AP scaling to the same base amount with 70% AD scaling and 55% AP scaling. In addition to that, the mana cost on this ability will be lowered from 50 to 70 to 65 flat at all ranks. These two changes are some decent nerfs to Shaco, but they probably could have nerfed him some other ways instead of targeting his E. Shaco will be placed in the Jungle S tier for patch 9.24b. The Jungle tier list sees a couple of changes in our patch update. In the S+ tier, we have one new member, which is Elise. Elise's win rate has been steadily climbing since the start of the preseason, and she's become one of the best junglers in the game. Her ability to brute force plays with early tower dives is super valuable, especially in this jungle meta. On top of that, her dueling potential is pretty strong, and professional Korean junglers like Tarzan, Clid, and Peanut have been spamming a new build with her, which involves taking Conqueror. Although I'm a huge fan of the Electrocute Elise build, I'm going to trust these Korean pros and try taking Conqueror the next time I play her. In the S tier, we have one new member as well, which is Zac. Zac is one of the most underrated champions in the game, period. His gank potential is ridiculously strong, and his base damage is off the charts. Whenever I play Zac, I often find myself doing the most or second most damage in the game despite having 0 offensive items. Landing a bundled elastic slingshot or a multiple hit ultimate can do a devastating amount of burst. Do not sleep on Zac. He's so strong, and I encourage all junglers to try him out. In the A tier, we have one pick that we want to mention, which is Rengar. Rengar's jungle win rate has been steadily increasing since the start of the preseason, and he's pretty much on par with some of the S tier champions. However, with the buffs being made to the lethality items, it might just be enough for him to make that last small push into the S tier. However, we'll keep him in A for now and see if that changes in our next update. Now, let's run it down mid. Heimerdinger. Heimerdinger has been pretty strong in the top and bot lane recently and was in dire need of some nerfs. For patch 9.24b, Heimer will receive 2 changes which are targeted at lowering his damage output. Firstly, his W, Hextech Micro Rockets, will have its damage reduced from 60 to 180 to 50 to 170. Next up is Empowered E, CH-3X Lightning Grenade, will have its damage lowered from 150 to 350 with 75% scaling to 100 to 300 with 60% scaling. These two nerfs are really big and will reduce his oppressiveness during the laning phase. The mid lane tier list sees a couple of changes in our patch update. In the S+ tier, we have two brand new members, which are Diana and Kassadin. Diana recently received a rework and she's been busted in the mid lane. Her win rate is one of the highest we've seen from a newly reworked champion, and she will likely receive a nerf very soon. This does somewhat upset me because her rework is so fun to play and it's been one of my favorite changes within the past few years. Her ultimate is really satisfying to use, but I will say it's a little bit extremely broken. Kassadin, on the other hand, did receive some nerfs recently, but it appears that they weren't enough and he still remains in the S+ tier status. Conqueror or Fleet combined with Presence of Mind is just broken right now, and it just feels like he doesn't get punished hard enough for having a weak early game. Whenever he hits that 2-item power spike, he can just come back and do a ton of damage thanks to these runes. If you want to gain some freeload during the preseason, then we highly recommend you start playing any of these three champs in the S+ tier. Last in the mid lane tier list, we want to talk about Aphelios. Much like Diana, this champion is pretty strong right now, but only in the bottom lane. Playing in mid is pretty much suicide because he has no way to survive ganks or against the burst of his counterparts like Zed, Diana, Ahri, Fizz, Cassiopeia, Katarina, Echo Talon, and the list goes on. If you want to win your games, then avoid playing him mid. Now onto the ADCs. Aphelios. Aphelios is the latest champion to hit the Rift, but the balance team want to let players settle in with him before they give him any massive changes. For patch 9.24b, they will be nerfing him by a small amount, but nothing too major. Currently, it seems like his Infernum-empowered ultimate is way too strong, and the marks are a little bit too punishing. However, this patch, Aphelios will only receive two nerfs, starting with Calibrum's mark damage ratio being dropped by 10%. Next up, his ultimate, Moonlight Vigil, will have its empowered damage lowered by 10% as well, combined with a 100 range nerf. These two nerfs are not that big, and Aphelios will be placed in the S tier for ADCs. Next up in the bottom lane, we have my favorite champion in the whole game, Ezreal. Ever since the removal of Kleptomancy, Ezreal has been struggling in the meta for quite a bit. Although he did receive some hotfix buffs last patch, they were pretty much negated by the Conqueror nerfs made for ranged users. For patch 9.24b, Ezreal will have his Q, Mystic Shots, AD ratio increased by 10%. He will be moved up from the C tier into the A tier for ADCs, and this will make him a solid pick once again. The ADC tier list sees a couple of changes in our patch 9.24b update. In the S+ tier, we have one new member, which is Senna. Senna received a lot of nerfs recently, but it's become clear that they were nowhere near enough to drop her down a notch. She still does a disgusting amount of damage and has an extremely overloaded kit. However, I don't really mind because Senna is quite fun to play, but sometimes when I play against her, I wish Riot just shoved her back into a lantern. Next up in the S tier, we need to talk about Kai'Sa. Although she's still one of the most popular ADCs in the game, her dominance has dropped by quite a bit thanks to champs like Miss Fortune, Senna, and Caitlyn becoming more popular. She's still a pretty strong pick in the bot lane right now, but you have to be really careful during the laning phase. You can be bullied out by a lot of these early game picks, especially that 4 Doran's Blade MF build that's been tearing up Korean solo queue. Now, on to the supports. Alistar. Alistar has been feeling a bit weak ever since the changes made to support items. In order to bring up his stance in the meta, the balance team will be making a few buffs to his kit. Firstly, he'll see a few changes to his health, AD, and AD growth. Next up, his passive, Triumphant Roar, will have its healing increased from 20 to 139 to 25 to 161. These buffs are really small and won't impact his stance in the meta too much, but he'll be moved up into the support B tier. The support tier list sees a couple of changes in patch 9.24b. For starters, we have the same 3 champions in the S+ tier, which are Nautilus, Leona, and Blitzcrank. However, for the S tier, we have one new champion, which is Soraka. Soraka has been dominating in the support role recently, and her win rate has been climbing steadily since the preseason started. This is kind of strange because there were no major changes made to her kit recently, but it's mostly due to the meta shifting in her favor. If you're looking for an enchanter support to climb with, then we highly recommend you try Soraka. Next up in the A tier, we have one new champion, which is Braum. Braum received a mini rework at the start of patch 9.24, and he's been doing a lot better. The changes made to his kit have been a net positive for him, and Braum mains seem to be pretty pleased. However, it does suck that there are no support items for full tank champs like Braum or Alistar, but I'm just happy they buffed him in the first place. Lastly, for supports, we have to talk about the Yuumi rework. Although her changes were targeted to help her out in solo queue, her stance in the meta hasn't really changed. The nerfs made to her Q were really big, and you can see how awful her win rate still is. However, those E changes feel really good, but I hope they buffer a little bit more because she seems pretty underwhelming. That's it for our patch 9.24b rundown video. If you enjoyed watching this video, then please leave a like, comment, and sub to our channel to be notified of our next video. Make sure to check out our website for in-depth content and guides that were made by your favorite pro players. The second part of our meta-analysis video will be available next week, which will bring you the most accurate tier list available using fresh stats. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you out on the Rift.